Greetings, everybody. My name is Amodani Gariba, speaking from Ho in the Volta region of Ghana, and it's now 3:45 p.m. GMT in Ghana, and I guess it's time for us to start with our discussion. Um, we're going to be discussing insecurity in Africa and how insecurity has been um, worsening with the lack of unity, political unity of African nations and African leaders. And that's going to be our topic for discussion today. I hope you're going to have a good time with me, and then you are free to ask me any question after the presentation, and I'll try to the best of my ability to answer them. First of all, let me introduce myself properly. I'm the chairman of the Nkrumah Circle, and the Nkrumah Circle is a youth organization based here in Accra, and uh, we are mainly breathing more life into the ideas of Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who happens to be the first president of the Republic of Ghana, and also a man that was voted by BBC World listeners as the most important African personality of the last 100 years. He's also known as the father of Pan-Africanism. So here in Ghana, we are trying to live, relive his ideas and philosophy in the hope that people in Ghana would grasp the importance of having to fight against neo-colonialism, which, according to Kwame Nkrumah, he says is the last stage of imperialism. Right, so now let's dig into our topic. To insecurity. Insecurity, before, when we hear the word insecurity, our mind is drawn to areas like the Middle East, because we will be thinking about Iraq, we'll be thinking about Afghanistan, we'll be thinking about Pakistan, and what have you. But lately, we've seen that the landscape of terrorism and insecurity has been shifting, and gradually it is coming to Africa. And this development is very regrettable, very unfortunate, because in my estimation, Africa, amongst all the other regions or continents in the world, is the least placed to be able to deal with the challenges of insecurity and terrorism. Yet, increasingly, we are faced with this challenge. So, but to me, again, insecurity is not only about terrorism, it's not only about group of people who, in the name of their religion, are terrorizing people, brutalizing people, burning down villages, and what have you. To me, insecurity is an age-old problem in Africa. Colonialism was an insecurity problem. Colonialism was a terrorist, system that brutalized African people, here on the continent for approximately 100 years. And slavery before it also brutalized a lot of Africans. Estimate shows that about 50 million Africans perished in the course of the slave raid that lasted 400 to 500 years. So there has been a historic, problem of insecurity and terrorism in Africa, right? So, but I'll be going deeper into terrorism relating to colonialism. To me, colonialism was a terrorist system. We have, especially when Africans rose up to fight against colonialism in the anti-colonial struggles that engulfed the whole of Africa in the mid 50s and 60s, and sometimes in the 70s. We saw colonial authority unleash brutal force in their bid to quell down these anti-colonial liberation movements. And before the anti-colonial liberation movements, there were movements that opposed colonialism from the onset. In a bid to establish itself, colonialism also unleashed brutal force to subjugate African forces that were against its establishment. So terrorism insecurity has been with Africa for quite some time now. So to mention a few, you have Angola, the brutal war that MPLA had to fight against the Portuguese, and later on the apartheid regime in South Africa in conjunction with the US, US imperialism. The lives that were shed, the blood that was shed, the lives that were lost, uncountable. There are thousands. This is terrorism, because why should an African have to die on his own land because they are fighting, they are calling for freedom? They just say, I just want to be free in my own country, and because of that, I have to die. If I have to die because of such a thing, it's terrorism. It's terrorism. You can also mention the case of Zimbabwe, the second Chimurenga war, or the war of liberation that the late Robert Mugabe waged against the settler colonial regime of Ian Smith and Rhodesia. Lots of lives had to perish in their quest to be free. Just imagine, you just want to be free in your own land and you have to die for it. That's terrorism. We can talk of Namibia. How the Germans brutalized Namibians in the name of colonization. And then you have DR Congo, which Patrice Lumumba was also brutally murdered, for standing up for his country by Belgian colonial forces in conjunction with the UN. That's something that we don't know. The UN was implicit in the murder of Patrice Lumumba, and it all happened because of colonialism. That is terrorism. And in fact, for DR Congo, which is the Democratic Republic of Congo, the terrorism has been going on for quite some time now. The country has been in a state of perpetual warfare. You have civil wars in every length and breadth of the country, and this is a spillover effect from the anti-colonial struggles that happened in the country in the late 50s and early 60s. So to me, colonialism, terrorism, religious-based terrorism are all terrorism, because in the final analysis of it, is the Africans that suffer for it, African people that suffer for it. So you have Boko Haram in Nigeria terrorizing people in northern parts of Nigeria. You have ISWAP. You have Al Qaeda in the Islamic in the Maghreb. All these are terrorist entities that are terrorizing African people, and African people are having to pay the price for it, just as how they paid the price for it during colonialism. So now, what are the factors that are accounting for the rise in terrorism in Africa? One of the key factors that is most forgotten, people don't really recognize that fact, is the fall of Gaddafi in Libya. Is one of the single most important factor that is accounting for the rise in terrorism in Africa. African leaders did not appreciate the role that Gaddafi was playing using Libya as a stopgap for terrorist elements, to stop terrorist elements from invading, the Sahel region and beyond in Africa. The African leaders did not appreciate, did not acknowledge this fact until the man was brutally murdered and his country destroyed by Libya. And now the floodgates of terrorists or terrorism had been opened, and now terrorism is a big problem in Africa. It's a big problem. Ghana, that has relatively known peace, is now on the radar of terrorists. Burkina Faso has been hit quite a number of times by these terrorists. Togo has been hit, and now it's just a matter of fact before Ghana is also hit by terrorists. And Ghana is not in isolation in this. Togo would also succumb, Benin and what have you. It's a real challenge that that Africans that is confronting Africans, and it has come as a result of the fall of Gaddafi. We sat down aloof as US NATO forces bombed and killed Gaddafi, and now we are having to deal with the repercussions, which is increasing surge of terrorism in Africa. You know, before after the fall of Gaddafi and the destruction of Libya, you had this gargantuan, increase in the trade of weapons on the black market. You had all kinds of weapons infiltrating down south of Libya into Niger, into Nigeria. And in fact, that is where the terrorist elements in Nigeria and elsewhere in the Sahel are getting weaponry from. Aside that, you have an infiltration of manpower. You have hardened terrorists from different regions of the world trooping into the Sahel region because of the porosity, the lack of government presence in this region, and they are terrorizing the people. So before the demise of Gaddafi, Africa did not have that problem. At least West Africa, we did not have a terrorist problem. But we know just 2 years after the fall of Gaddafi, Mali was on fire. The first coup d'etat happened because the military was disenchanted about the government's inability to contain the insecurity situation in the north of the country. So they took things to their hands and then deposed the government, right? And then we are seeing, terrorist infiltration in Burkina Faso recently, which started in 2015. And it doesn't look like it's going to stop. And there has been a coup d'etat as a result of that, because the government is incapable of managing the situation. But my point is, all this is happening because we sat aloof for Gaddafi to be killed. And now, why was Gaddafi killed? That's one thing I want to address before moving on. Gaddafi was killed because according to Hillary Clinton's email, Gaddafi was building a tremendous financial system for Africa, something that was going to give economic liberation to the whole continent, something that's going to sever Africa's relationship with the IMF, which is a parasitic one. I mean, a relationship of conditionalities, a relationship of austerity, a relationship of poverty. Now, with the African Monetary Fund that Gaddafi was planned to set up, it was going to liberate Africans from the clutches of the IMF. You have the African Development Bank that Gaddafi wanted to set up, and you have the African Central Bank that was supposed to be headquartered in Lagos, Nigeria, I think Abuja, Nigeria, right? And then another important thing was the introduction of the single currency for Africa, which is backed by gold. Now, this was going to be a major blow to the dollar, or the dollar system in the world, and it was going to be pioneered by African people. So the US imperialists, Western imperialists, could not sit to let such a thing happen. So Gaddafi needed to be taken out. But even prior to that, Gaddafi signaled how Africa could be strong militarily by assembling a 1 million African soldiers marching in Tripoli, to show to the world that, Africans can rise up to the task and solve their own military problem. And now that is going to, if that was to happen in reality, that is going to, decrease the influence that Western imperialism has on Africa's military affairs. Currently we know that they are funding most of the peacekeeping missions in Africa. We can't even find our own peacekeeping missions. So with such a thing, Africa was on the rise to take off, and Gaddafi, who was the pioneer, had to be taken off, right? And Africa did not see its interest with Gaddafi, so we sat aloof, watched him die in a brutal murder, and watched his country reduced to rubbles. And now we are suffering we thought it was about Libya alone, and now we are suffering the consequences of it, to the point that even Ghana is on the radar of the terrorists and could at any point in time be hit. That's the severity of the problem. Now, What is also another factor that is accounting for the increasing incidence of terrorism in Africa is the lack of Africa's unity, lack of Africa's political unity. You know, there is no common policy on defense. Every country is trying to figure out its problem individually, alone, no collaboration. You know, but take for instance Boko Haram in Nigeria. They are operating between Cameroon, Niger, and Nigeria. So if these three countries cannot collaborate, they are going to be unsuccessful at defeating Boko Haram. And that is why since 2011, Nigeria seemed not to have been able, or I mean, at least, I mean, that's what we are seeing all over. Nigeria has not been able to tackle the situation of Boko Haram. But what is Boko Haram compared to Nigeria? I quite remember reading that Nigeria was very instrumental in giving a military solution to the civil wars in Sierra Leone and Liberia. So if Nigeria could stop a civil war in Nigeria and Sierra Leone, why can't Nigeria find a military solution to its own problem? Like, it doesn't excuse my language, it doesn't make sense. But it's not because Nigeria is incapable. It's not because Nigeria is innately incapable. Nigeria has the human resource. Nigeria has the technology. It has the resources to be able to clamp down on Boko Haram. But it has not been able to because there is no collaboration. There is no common defense policy. So if it's trying to fight Boko Haram in its country, Boko Haram would run to Niger, regroup, and come back, or run to Niger, regroup, and come back. And so because there's no common defense policy in Africa, you're having to face these challenges. There's no military high command. You know, we don't have an African standby force that is ready to move into any African country in distress. We don't have such a system. And not having such a system is really biting hard. Very hard on some countries like Chad, on some countries like Burkina Faso. I mean, it's about time that we had an African military high command. And in fact, let me state that the lack of an African military high command is or was responsible for the destabilization of Democratic Republic of Congo and the murder of Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba was looking up to African countries to help him find a military solutions to the secessionist movement in Katanga and the Belgian problem, the Belgian colonialists who had refused to leave the country, even though the country had gained independence. So he had to rely on the UN. But we know who controls the UN is Western imperialism. So they brought in UN forces, and UN forces, to some extent, I mean, to most extent, were responsible for his capture, were responsible for his murder, was responsible for the destruction and appalling condition of DR Congo today. Had we had an African military high command, there would not have been any need for a UN mission in Congo. The problem would have been sorted. Belgium would have no place in Africa. Katanga, the secessionist movement in Katanga would have been solved, and Lumumba would have continued to build Congo into the modern state that it needed to be built into, not the sorry state it finds itself in right now. You know, so this is another factor that has brought about the increasing incidence of insecurity in Africa. You know, and so Kwame Nkrumah, the man I referred to earlier on in my presentation, made this sage saying. He said all military problems, before he said military strategy presupposes political aims. All military problems are political, and all political problems are economic. And so the logic goes that we have not been able to address the challenge of military or of insecurity and terrorism in Africa because we have not been able to unite, which is a political solution. We are having military problems because we lack the political solutions. And now we lack the political solutions because we are lacking in economic solutions. And let me explain further. We in Africa, African leaders to some extent, the AU, anytime they have to embark on a military solution in any African country, they have to rely on EU, the US, for funding. But why can't Africa fund its own military missions? Africa is sitting on gold. Africa is sitting on diamond. Africa is sitting on coltan. Africa is sitting on oil. Why haven't we been able to develop our country? Why haven't we been able to amass the resources needed for our own development, needed for funding different military missions in different African countries? The simple answer is we don't control our resources. Africa does not control its resources. And the leaders we have in place have been planted to make sure that Africa does not control its resources. And so we have the capitalist system overseeing the economic order in Africa, whereby political leaders are implanted to further the interest of capitalism. And they will make sure, they will go to every extent to make sure that the masses of people in Africa do not have control over the resources or control over the means of production. So in essence, as African people, we have to call for socialism. We have to call for socialism. Calling for socialism is going to put right all the wrong political situations that we find ourselves inside. So having the right economic framework is going to give us the right political solution, and having the right political solution is going to give us the right military solutions, right? So this is what Kwame was talking about when he said that all military problems are political and all political problems are economic. So in short, for Africa to progress, for Africa to find a lasting solution to these threats of terrorism, this growing challenge of insecurity, we need a political union. There needs to be a political union in Africa. There needs to be Pan-Africanism, African unity. I feel the AU is actually slow in uniting Africa. You know, they have something they call the Agenda 2063, but that's too long. That's too far away. Some of those leaders are going to be dead by the time the 2063 is here, yet they set the goal at 2063. African unity is something that must be done now. It's not about, it's not a future, it's not a future adventure. It's something that should have been achieved 50 years ago, but it's still not too late, but we have to deal with it now. After that, we have to make sure that the economic order of the day in Africa is socialism, because that's the only system that is going to give us the resources needed to develop our country, the resources needed to face the challenges squarely and put them to rest. Without all these, I mean, without political union and a socialist economic order, we will not be able to find the right military solution. So it is not surprising that African countries have not been able to find lasting military solutions to their problems. Like I said, they lack political unity, and their economic system is in shambles because it's in the hands of the capitalist system. Right. So this is where I will end with my presentation. I mean, we've spoken for about 25 minutes. So I'm going to pause here and then take some questions. Not only question, you can also type your comments on my presentation. Yes, you're absolutely right. Zizwe Tichiguka. He said we have to build an African high command, the AACPC, AAPRP, AAPRA, to get to scientific socialism. Yes, exactly. Osajifo Dr. Nkrumah called for these organizations to be formed in his book, Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. I mean, the book highlights the solution. I mean, the practical steps that Africa should take to get itself out of the shambles that it finds itself currently. And I recommend to every revolutionary, every African, to get a copy and read. I mean, it's a very solid book. Yes, so I have a question from Tierney Pepra. She asks, where do you see Ghana heading in the next 5 years as far as instability is concerned? Yes, so currently the government is embarking on a campaign of see something, say something, as a way of sensitizing the people against terrorism. And I think these are halfway measures, you know. It cannot be the solutions to the problem, to the challenges that the terrorism challenges that we face. Currently, on the northern border with Burkina Faso alone, there are more than 50 points of entry, more than 50 points of entry in between Ghana and Burkina Faso, and many of these entry points are not manned by any immigration officers, because of course there is not enough resources to employ many immigration officers to man the borders so that we can check everybody coming into the country. And yes, so it's a question of resource. The country currently does not have the resources to properly parole its borders, and it's a serious challenge, and is one that I cannot see I cannot see getting solved in the next 5 years. So long as we have a porous border, these terrorist elements can infiltrate. And intelligence suggests that they have already infiltrated. And there are between 200 to 300 Ghanaians that are being trained in Niger and elsewhere in the Sahel region for possible, deployment in Ghana. So this is the challenge. Ghana is going to take hits in the next 5 years. There is going to be, the likelihood of a terrorist attack in Ghana is very high from now to the next 5 years. And even if we had all our borders very well patrolled, it's still not going to solve the problem, because as long as Burkina Faso is in crisis, the likelihood that is going to spill over to Ghana is very high. So in getting a micro-nationalist solution to the problem of insecurity in Africa is not an everlasting one. Is a halfway measure. What we really need to call for in Ghana is collaboration with our neighbors, real proper collaboration, intelligence gathering. So that we can really tackle these challenges. And I've said, trying to collaborate on this level is going to be difficult if there is no political collaboration. So the problem of insecurity is also a political problem, not just a military problem. It's also a political problem. So they might talk about collaborating here and there, but so long as there's no proper concrete political collaboration between African countries, between Ghana and its neighbors, the problem of insecurity looms large, and it's just a matter of time before Ghana gets hit. So Zizwe Tichiguka also has this question. It says, I just found out that Ghana allows the US to occupy one of its airports. What's the role of AFRICOM in Ghana? Right. So true. Yes, the US military is occupying one of the sections of the airport in Ghana here, and it's very sad. I remember when the deal was announced, there was an outcry. We organized demonstrations against it. We organized public forums to educate the people on the need to to not allow for such a thing to happen, because you see, once you have US having establishing a footprint here in Ghana, as they have done now, I mean, it deeply brings us into the web of terrorism, because US is the number one enemy of so many people in the world, and having US in the country is going to make Ghana, I mean, is going to put Ghana on the red list of these terrorists, and so we canvassed support against it, and well, we've not been successful. You know, the government of the day is a neo-colonialist one, is one that is paid by US imperialism, and so they had their way. They control the political process, the political system, so they had their way, and now we are having to deal with it. We are having to live in a country with a US military footprint. You know, so I think that's what I have to say about that. And then here, Imole Oye is asking, is US imperialism related to the terrorist elements in West Africa? Yes, I believe so. I strongly believe so, because intelligence we've gathered says that the US flew in 18,000 Al-Qaeda terrorists from Afghanistan and elsewhere to Benghazi during the NATO invasion of Libya. So, and the US has sought to use them. I mean, the US used them practically to destabilize Libya. And some of these people are deeply into the Sahel. I mean, upsetting the political process, terrorizing people, and what have you. So there is no way we can delink US imperialism from terrorist elements in Africa. No way at all. I believe it's one of the ways that US uses to secure political and economic control over African countries by instigating and fomenting political instability. It gets an edge over this country to control their resources and control the political system. So I believe strongly that US imperialism is very much related to terrorist elements in West Africa. And in fact, I mean, the US CIA created Al-Qaeda. I mean, what more evidence do we want aside that? I mean, US imperialism is behind terrorists in Syria that have been waging war against the government of Bashar al-Assad and what have you. So evidence elsewhere, you know, and fact that has happened. I mean, I just mentioned the 18,000 terrorists were flew by US into Benghazi. I mean, clearly shows that the US is in the business of using terrorism to their advantage all over the world. Mesa Jabul also has this question: that is there anything about the AU's long-term plan that sounds promising? Well, I cannot think of one readily, but of all the policies that I've seen from the US, from the AU, like I said earlier, it's too futuristic. We want practical solution to present problems. But you're talking about Agenda 2063. By the time most of them would have been dead, you know, the challenges of Africa are challenges that could be addressed by continental-wide solutions. And this is Pan-Africanism, or in other words, African unity. And so having, you know, halfway measures like, you know, Agenda 2063, where you want to reintegrate Africa, it's not about integration, it's about unity. And so the AU is actually, you know, somehow, if you consider it, a reactionary organization in Africa. It's a very reactionary organization. It's a club of, you know, bourgeois leaders from individual African countries that come to meet, discuss matters of their common interest, and go back to their respective country, having achieved nothing in line with solving the practical, solving the problems, or giving practical solutions to the problem that confront their people in their individual African country. You know, so for AU, I think is a lost cause. Any attempt at unification must come from the grassroots. I mean, we don't have to rely on the leaders anymore. We have to start from the grassroots, sensitizing the people, building mass-based organizations on the ground. And from there, I believe that we have a better chance of uniting Africa than having to rely on African leaders, accepting to form a union. They would not. Right. So our session was supposed to be last 45 minutes. We started at 3:45, and it's now 4:20 exactly. 45 minutes, I guess, or yeah, exactly 45 minutes. So I would like to bring the session to a close now, if there are no further questions. Okay, so thank you everybody for attending this session. I appreciate it very, very much, and I hope that we've learned a lot. And I hope that this session we've just had is going to be